Hi, I'm Rachel Barton Pine, and I'm so glad to be part of tonight's special event for the Grant Park Orchestra. I'm especially pleased to be joined by the wonderful composer Billy Childs, and I just want to say welcome to Chicago, even though I know virtually you're actually somewhere else, California, right?
Yep, Los Angeles, Sierra Madre, really. But yeah, glad to be in Chicago virtually and pretty much everywhere, you know. And glad to be working with you too.
Same here. Well, we've been working together for a few years now. Billy first composed for me a 4-movement unaccompanied suite called Four Portraits, and then after that a violin piano work, which we'll be talking about a little later. And this month was supposed to see the world premiere of his new Violin Concerto, also written for me, with the Grant Park Orchestra. We're still hoping that that performance can take place next summer, but we're bringing this special program to you instead right now. And we're going to kick things off with the first movement of that unaccompanied suite. So do you want to set this up and say a little bit about the suite and this first movement, Billy?
Yes. So basically, when you asked me to do this, I was really shocked and really honored to write something for solo violin for someone like you who is just world class, top of level violinist, and so, but it was daunting because I'm a piano player, and I had written for violin in the context of an orchestra or chamber work, but never a solo violin piece, and one that was kind of inspired. I guess the inspiration was the Bach Partita in D minor, and so I really wanted to write something that kind of evoked Bach and was kind of an homage to Bach, but also had my language in it. And I also enlisted the help of a very dear friend of mine, Dale Bridenthal, who is a violinist at the Los Angeles Philharmonic. And I would write something and say, well, could this work or could this work? And she really helped me there. But so I wrote it in 4 movements, and each movement, the key that the movement is in corresponds to an open string on the violin. So the first movement, Prelude and Allegro, is in A minor, basically, and it just, I wanted an opening pronouncement. It's really not in a dance form like the partita is. It's just, a prelude and an allegro section that moves. That's kind of a fast, a kind of a majestic pronouncement opening, and then into kind of a pattern-based, series of 16th note motion. And so I wanted to write that, and I love how you interpreted it.
Yeah, well, I've played the whole suite numerous times at this point, and look forward to continuing to play it for probably the rest of my career. But as far as a standalone movement, I mean, I love all 4 movements, but this first movement is the one I perform most often somehow or another if I only have time to play one movement. Maybe I'll experiment with seeing how the others feel in isolation, but right now this is the one that I always use to show people, kind of what your voice is when I only have a few minutes to do so. So let's kick it off with the Prelude and Allegro in A.
Cool. Beautiful. Yeah. This one, this movement is is the one that resembles my impression of Bach most closely. The other ones have a kind of a more modern feel to it, but this one has, with the 16th notes and the patterns and the sequences, was kind of my version of my imitation of Bach, I guess.
And definitely lots of multiple voice writing going on. Even when there aren't multiple notes being played at the same time, there's still a feel of a dialogue happening.
Yeah, it's good. And I love, I mean, the choices you made, interpretation-wise, especially at the end of the last series of notes. You sped it up a little bit to make it. It seems more like it's racing to the finish. It seems like converging to a point, you know, to a stopping point. You know, it's almost like a vortex is sucking the musical notes into this black hole, and it's great.
Well, it's wonderful to get to live with a piece long enough that it starts to become really intuitive. Mm-hmm. But, you know, the other thing is to try to figure out what your intentions are and bring that to life. And, you know, we had probably a lot of you watching right now saw the little preview clip of when I had just gotten the music to this and we were working on it together in L.A. And Billy asked me to play one little passage a little bit faster, and someone commented on the video, well, why didn't he just write it that way? Well, the fact is he did, but you know, there's only so much you can convey on the page, and it's so great to work with living composers because you can actually ask them questions like, wait, what did you mean by that dot? Is it a light dot, or is it an aggressive, marked kind of note? You know, you can't text Beethoven. We have to rely on, you know, the correspondence between the composer and people who lived at the time. And, you know, for later music, we have maybe a recorded record of how people interpreted it closer to the time of its writing. But yeah, so it's a wonderful feeling of posterity to get to, you know, sort of be part of the process of this work coming to life.
Yeah, and from my end, too, I really appreciate this collaborative way of doing things, because coming from a jazz background, I mean, this is kind of how we work things out in the jazz world, too. You know, you'll you know, the tune will be a lot more a lot less detail put into it many times, and so then it's kind of arrived at, the last version of it is arrived at by consensus. But when writing classical music, you know what, these kind of collaborations have made me actually have to know exactly what I meant when I wrote every detail. And I actually like that. I really love shaping the nuts and bolts of very small, minute details, because those minute details can have an impact on the overall effect, which is what I'm going for. But it means that you really need to understand why you wrote something and what you meant by it.
Yeah, and what's interesting is that since you're a keyboard player, for the piano, of course, you don't have to do down bows and up bows and
Exactly.
change direction, and so you can have a slur, this line that goes over as many notes as you want, which means that they're all kind of joined together in a long line. But of course, on the violin, you're simply going to run out of bow. And a violinist composer would write more utilitarian slurs that would be supposed to indicate where you change your bow. But then the question becomes, are those phrase marks or slurs? And so you often write, and I notice in your concerto the same thing, and in the piece that you wrote for violin and piano, we had to discuss it, and in this upcoming slow movement, some long slurs that are physically impossible on the violin, but I appreciate seeing them, because then I know what you meant, and then my task is to keep that sound of the long line, but then split up the bow as necessary.
Yeah.
And I actually love to leave in the printed music the original slur, and then maybe put some downs and ups on top of it to kind of have the best of both worlds. Like, here's where you can split the bow, but make sure we don't hear you doing it.
Yeah. The slurs, basically, when I write slurs and other articulations and things like that, they are interpretive directions. They're not like technical directions, because I'm not, I'm familiar with how to write for violin, but I'm not a violinist. And I think a violinist, especially a violinist such as yourself, is much better equipped to, if I were to try and write, the technical slurring and the up bows and down bows, invariably you'd probably cross everything out and say, no, I'm going to do it this way. Because you know best, and I would kind of leave that to you, and so that's kind of why. So when I write slurs and things like that, it's more an interpretive suggestion of how I want it to sound ultimately.
Well, and there are certain moments when you hadn't written a slur, and you wanted the notes to be joined together, and we realized that on the violin we needed to add a slur to achieve that. And so it's been wonderful to kind of go back and forth and sort of figure this all out. And I love getting, ideas for the instrument from players, from people who don't play it, because that expands our possibilities and allows us to think beyond the limitations of what we do. Well, let's get into this and hear some slurs in this Adagio Lyrico. Halfway through the piece, I know you repeat the melody, but now with a kind of a counterline accompaniment.
I wanted to do that. This one is in E minor, and it's kind of almost like in two parts. It's I guess a long, loose binary form. There's this melody, and then it goes into these different themes, and then I kind of do the same thing in the second half, a little bit more ornate. And the second time, the melody has like a 16th note counter melody playing at the same time, I love how you interpret this one as well.
Okay, well, I'll try my best. Here we go.
Okay. Thank you. That was beautifully played. It's funny.
I love how it ends with just that single E just floating in the air.
Yeah. It's kind of an on an aesthetic an aesthetic comment would be that it's an utterance of love, of romantic love. It's funny. The first two ones that you played were the first two movements are the ones that are not really based on the dance forms, even though this is mirroring the partita. I guess I wanted to, I saw these more as, that's why I call it four portraits, because it's basically portraits of some sort of mood that I'm trying to evoke. Rather than some sort of dance that I'm trying to evoke.
Absolutely. Well, speaking of evoking moods, let's change gears for a minute and talk about your incredible piece for violin and piano. I had wanted something of yours for my album that I made a couple of years ago on Sadie Records, Blues Dialogues, and I didn't feel that this unaccompanied piece was appropriate for that particular set of repertoire, so I asked for something new, and you had never written a piece for violin and piano before, so that was really cool. And you were inspired to actually have a particular topic for this piece.
Yeah, basically, and actually I found this event, this unfortunate event, inspiring for a lot of pieces of music that I've written. It was basically the murder of Philando Castile really affected me deeply, because I didn't, while I didn't see the actual, they showed the actual shooting of him on a video. What I saw was the aftermath video of it, taken by his girlfriend, Diamond Reynolds, I think her name is. And you see just this guy in a white T-shirt, where this is just blood in the bottom of the T-shirt, and you see the life going from his face, and it really affected me a lot. So I had written three things that were inspired by that. I wrote the piece for you. I wrote a poem, and in this poem, and the poem I actually put it in a larger piece that I wrote about racial inequality and injustice, and through the prism of my own experience. So this piece is called Incident on Larpenteur Avenue. Larpenteur Avenue is the name of the street on which he got killed.
In Minneapolis.
In Minneapolis, where, surprise, surprise, another horrendous incident which started these whole protests, the killing of George Floyd, took place.
Yeah. And tomorrow in Chicago at 6 p.m. out in Oz Park, there's going to be the entire Chicago string community coming together to do a violin vigil for in memory of Elijah McClain, the young violinist who was killed last year. And I've been actually collaborating with the organizers of that event to get all of the music put together. And
yeah, good luck with that. I would tell me when it happens, and I'd love to see it. Maybe it'll be streamed or something. But yeah, so this piece was inspired by that, and I actually there's a section in the middle where it's kind of a musical description of the events, or my take on the events through music.
Well, let's first start with the opening, which is really just setting a mood, a very unsettled sort of feeling of the music. Okay. Let's hear a little bit of that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
very ominous.
Yeah.
Very ominous.
Yeah, I wanted an unsettled feeling, and I also wanted the 16th note pattern in the piano, and a shout out to Matthew Hagel, who played it beautifully.
Absolutely.
I wanted that unsettled feeling, and the 16th note motion to indicate like kind of a pursuit of some sort, like kind of a being chased.
Well, and then it gets
hunted.
even more. Then it gets even more programmatic. We hear the actual, 8 gunshots played by the piano.
It's actually 7, but the passage where it's where it begins, where you hear the first one, is actually it's an ending point to the preceding material, and then after that is like 7 gunshots. And then
you can hear the tension rising, and then
Yeah.
this. Okay, well, let's listen to that.
Yeah. Right, yeah. So the piano is punctuating those gunshots, and what you're doing on top is kind of like a combination of how I saw the tension, like the policeman, his attitude, the girlfriend's attitude, and Philando, the shock of everything. You know, it's like the human reaction. The piano is symbolizing the gunshots, and what you're doing is symbolizing the human reaction to those gunshots.
And then speaking of human reactions, the next section is just heartbreaking. And I remember you telling me that certain moments were like, you know, the child, the young girl in the back seat, and her response.
Yeah. It starts with what the piano is doing, kind of a dirge-like thing, which to me is symbolizing the life slowly exiting Philando Castile's body. You know, it's moving out slowly, almost like in those movies you see where it rises, the camera angle rises from the body. You know, like his spirit is being excised, and at the same time, you're playing like the anger that is like the Diamond Reynolds anger at the situation, and then there's a lament that happens, and it symbolizes the sadness of the whole thing.
Okay, well, let's listen to this. This is our final excerpt that we're going to share with you right now. And then, of course, the music ends with more of the unsettled sound from the opening.
Right.
As if, nothing has been resolved and there's no catharsis and this might happen again, which, of course, it has. And
Yeah. I have to say, you played that beautifully. That was just
thank
so
you.
moving.
Well, it was a privilege. It was a privilege to be able to play a piece like this because I think, music has such an important place in our society to shine a light on injustices like this. We think about last year when the Chicago Symphony and Riccardo Muti played Shostakovich's Babi Yar, and the music just reaches us in an emotional place and can doing our part to help these situations, I think.
Yeah, it's kind of it's a language that everybody speaks, and if something is beautifully rendered artistically, it communicates to anybody, no matter what religion or race or sex or sexual orientation or age. It is. I remember, I'm reminded of, didn't Daniel Barenboim form an orchestra of Palestinians and Israelis coming together?
Absolutely, the East-West Divan Orchestra with kids from all different Middle Eastern countries making music together. Yeah,
and it's just, it's a wonderful concept, and it's a uniter. And it also does, it brings to light, it can speak to issues in a way that politics can't. It can inspire you to want to change things. It can inspire you to want to be better and to feel things. So I'm thankful that I am in this world.
Absolutely. Well, Matthew Hagel and I hope that we will be performing this next spring, I believe, for at the Kennedy Center. Depending on how the pandemic goes. Hopefully it'll happen when it's supposed to happen. Otherwise, hopefully it'll happen sometime soon after that. But we're looking forward to performing this in the nation's capital, which I think will be really meaningful.
Yeah, I think so too.
Well, let's get back into the 4 portraits. The next movement is entitled Pavan, which was really a Renaissance dance type,
it's a little bit
into
later.
The 21st century.
Yeah, it's a little bit later than, or no, it's earlier, I think. I don't know. But it's I love the kind of stately nature of the pavans that I have heard. Of course, the Ravel one and the Fauré ones, and it indicates to me a very slow, stately kind of measured dance form. So I tried to do that in this movement. This one is in D minor.
The key of the Bach partita.
Yeah, that's right. And this one, I think, has the most use of double stops. Well, maybe not so much. The Adagio Lyrico has a lot of double stops and melodies that intertwine. But this one, I was, it's kind of a slow measured, it happens at a slow measured pace. I think this was the first movement that I wrote.
Well, I love how you go back and forth between having a more regular approach to the rhythm and having a more flowing approach. So it kind of has this ebb and flow. And you also play a lot with the contact point of the bow on the string, sometimes halfway in between our bridge and fingerboard where we get a normal sound, sometimes closer to the fingerboard where we get a covered sound, and sometimes closer to the bridge where we get a kind of icy sound.
Right, yeah. This one, I think, has a lot of well, not so much experimentation, but it drifts most into my harmonic language. Has a lot of bitonal, like lines that start in one key and end up in another key, and a lot of like intervallic leaps that are irregular and kind of jagged. So, yeah.
Well, let's hear it.
Yeah, let's hear it. beautiful.
Oh, I love how it has so many different parts that all kind of intertwine.
Yeah.
And it's not at all just one thing.
Yeah, there's one part that has like these wide intervaled arpeggios, that are either sol panicello or intermixed with harmonics. And I don't know I don't know why I wrote that in there. It just seemed like the next logical thing to do. It was influenced because I'm of the 70s. I'm a child of the 70s, and I grew up listening to fusion music. Return to Forever, Mahavishnu Orchestra, Herbie Hancock and the Headhunters, and Emerson, Lake and Palmer, progressive rock and stuff like that. And that thing kind of reminds me of like a guitar pattern that John McLaughlin might have come up with for the Mahavishnu Orchestra, like on Birds of Fire and something like that. It kind of has that real jagged, like wide leaping interval things. He would do it in odd meters. And I thought it would be cool to just add that,
Yeah, well, I love how your music is so American because it's classical music, but it has just this influence of jazz, which is absolutely built into its DNA.
Yeah.
And it's not any kind of crossover between jazz or classical. It's just the music that it is, and it's just so authentic.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah, I mean, I believe that everyone is pretty much the sum total of their experiences. And my experiences growing up as a kid in the 60s and 70s in Los Angeles is, American. I listened to, of course, the classical music, went to ballets, listened to Leonard Bernstein, but also listened to jazz and the popular music, the movie music, and all of it is part of who I am. And I always felt that my way in, because I never was the kind of composer who wanted to write just for myself. I always want to have, I write for people, and I want my music to invite the listener in. And I feel that the best way for me to do that is melodically, through melodic content. I think people relate to melodies, and so I've always tried to do that.
Yeah, well, let's invite people in to hear a sneak peek at a couple of the melodies of the Violin Concerto.
Yes, let's do that.
I've got an excerpt from each movement here. I have not. So basically, this is the part that normally the public would never see, which is where I'm not totally prepared because I don't know what to do with it yet. So,
you have a lot of courage. You have a lot of courage.
Yeah, so so this is basically obviously a rubato, which means kind of rhythmically free. The orchestra only plays a note here and there, and I'm just kind of playing this melody. And one thing I wanted to ask you is, were you thinking of it more towards the bright E string or the warm A string? Because I feel like these notes could be played in either place, and I wasn't quite sure if you had an idea in mind.
You're talking about the first movement.
Yes.
So
in other words...
So the first one you played on the A string, right?
Yes.
Yeah, I prefer that one. It's a little darker,
okay.
and the character of this melody, because I never told you this, but each movement is kind of corresponding to an emotional state, and the first one has to do with love, romantic love, but also joyous. Ebullient, rejoicing. The second movement has to do with remorse, and the first movement has to do with kind of like agitation and anger. So this.
Oh gosh! So the romance didn't work out.
Yeah, I guess not. And so yeah, so for the love part of it, I think it should be darker tones. It should be warmer tones. You know, it's kind of like a, let me see. You know, it kind of has that kind of feel. Can I hear?
Oh, I love it. I love hearing the harmonies that are under there. It adds so much.
Can you play it again? Are we synced up time-wise? I think we are. We did that little test.
Okay, well, let's see.
Go
the
ahead.
limitations of modern technology here.
Go ahead. Yeah. Yeah, it's kind of like that. I think it should move a little faster, though.
Okay.
It's a. Yes, it's kind of a quasi rubato thing. Actually, I wrote rubato, but it's kind of a quasi rubato. It's actually called violin, so everyone's going to be changing according to how you do it. But I think it should be.
So kind of like da ya da 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 ya da da.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. Yeah. Oh man.
Cool. Well, let's hear a little bit of the next movement.
This is my first time hearing it on the violin. It sounds.
Yeah, and you know, you sent this music to me a couple of months ago, but it's been very psychologically difficult to, you know, kind of do anything with any music pertaining to orchestras, just because of the sadness of every orchestra not performing right now.
I'm totally on. I mean, it was difficult to write this for the very same reason. It was it was like I had to fight through certain things, and I had to fight for and grab inspiration, you know, and sit down at the piano for hours looking at the keys, thinking. Because I was like, wow, when am I going to hear? When is this going to be heard? You know.
Yeah. Well, let's listen to a little of the second movement. You want to tell me something about it before I start to play?
Yeah, this is kind of just more a kind of has a sadness to it. It's just it's something that something elegiac, you know, in the spirit of like adagio for strings or something like that. Also I was thinking of the lark ascending, you know, with the open type of harmonies, at least in the opening statement of the melody, and so it's basically that. Can I hear just?
And actually, then the slurring patterns. It gives a different feel if I do this. If I do this slur. Or this slur.
I like that.
Those are the kind of. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So those are the kind of details that we'll have to work out, because clearly I can't do it all under a bow. Oh, that's really pretty. Okay.
You know, kind of goes there.
Yeah, but we'll have to leave everyone to anticipate the rest of that melody. And now the last movement says "with aggression." So, were you thinking of my love for heavy metal music, or?
Actually, I wasn't, but now that you mention it, think that, you know, it's going to come in handy for this.
So. Oh, my earbud's going to fall out.
Oh yeah.
And so this is just, yeah, kind of a wild ride.
Yeah.
I can't play it up to tempo yet, but...
Uh-huh. Mm-hmm.
That kind of thing.
Yeah, yeah. It's pretty much, it's very almost metronomic. It's almost like a machine gun. Da, 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 da.
Yeah.
So I guess your heavy metal analogy does work. Da, 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 da. Da, little, 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 da, 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 da. Da, little, 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 little.
You mentioned the Lark Ascending. Did you have other particular violin works in mind as you were composing this?
Yeah, actually, I found the William Walton Violin Concerto very inspiring.
That's really amazing, because that's a concerto that a number of famous violinists have recorded, but not nearly as often as Tchaikovsky and Brahms and all of those. And so,
yeah.
Well, people now have a year to check out the Walton Concerto in anticipation of your concerto.
Yeah, and actually people always, it's not even as celebrated as his viola concerto. When I say, I find the Walton Violin Concerto inspiring. People say, oh, you mean the viola concerto? And I'm like, no, the violin concerto.
I don't think either the viola or violin concerto, I don't think the viola concerto is better than the violin concerto. It's that violists sadly have so few concertos to play, they end up playing it far more frequently than us who have a vast repertoire, but it's just as great a piece and really worth checking out.
Yeah.
Well, I got to move things along here. Would you oblige us with
Sure.
a little piece of you playing the piano?
Yeah, sure. What I'm going to play is a piece that I wrote, which was inspired by a William Walton, William Carlos Williams poem called The Red Wheelbarrow. It's on my Jazz Chamber Music Volume 2 album, Autumn and Moving Pictures. And William Carlos Williams' poem, The Red Wheelbarrow, which is considered his masterpiece, is a short haiku-type poem. So much depends upon a red wheelbarrow, glazed with rainwater beside the white chickens. That's pretty much it. But it always brings to mind autumn. So this is the Red Wheelbarrow, short version.
Well, that was lovely. It might be about autumn, but it felt perfect for a beautiful summer evening here in Chicago.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Well, we're just about out of time, so I'm going to play us out with the last movement of Four Portraits, which is entitled Jig, and it's the wildest jig you've ever heard. But first, I want to thank you again, Billy, so much for joining me here tonight, and a big thank you to the Grant Park Music Festival for hosting tonight's event.
Thank you. It was a pleasure to be here.
Oh, hold on. I better take this earbud out.